Hello coders, welcome to another Laravel tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about the middleware of Laravel, and I'll be demonstrating how to install middleware and how to use middleware within your routes. But first, let me talk about why we need middleware in Laravel. There are 4 reasons why we have middleware. The first one is users and their restrictions. So authentication and user restrictions. We are restricting the user from parts of our application, and we can do that using the middleware. The second reason is CSRF protection, to make sure that the parts of our site are protected with CSRF. The third reason is to manipulate the request, because what the middleware does is it takes the request, and before it hits anything else, we can manipulate that request. So we can actually change the parameters of the request before we actually deal with that within the controller. We can also use the middleware to log requests as well. Okay, let's start by creating our middleware with Laravel. I'll provide links to this GitHub repository in the tutorial notes. Today's tutorial is housed in tutorials/tutorial_1, and it is just a standard Laravel application. The middleware is housed in app and then HTTP and middleware. I've created a middleware called ensure key is valid, and if we open that up, we can see that we have a handle method. I'll show you how to generate all of this in just a second, but let's just talk about what this does. So the ensure key class uses the Symfony component HTTP Foundation response. It also uses the request. It also uses a closure. It is within the namespace app HTTP middleware, and it is called ensure key is valid. So this is ensuring that the key of the HTTP request is valid. We have a handle method. This handle method takes a request and a next closure. What this is doing is it's checking the request has the input of key and make sure that it is not my secret key. And if that is the case, it returns to a /login page. So what this is doing is it's checking the request before it hits the controller or before the route does anything to it. And we can see how this all works within our web.php within our routes. What I've got here is a middleware group. I'll discuss this in more detail in a minute, where we have 2 routes within this group. And this group is ensure key is valid. And the first route is our /, that's the home page, that's going to the welcome page. And then we have another route here, which is /login, where we're returning the login view without middleware. So this is saying that we don't have to ensure that the key is valid on the login page. Now, if that didn't make any sense to you whatsoever, don't worry. What we're going to do is walk through this step by step. What I'm actually going to do is just comment this out, and I'm going to just rename this to be BKP. That way I have something to refer to, and we'll just create this from scratch. And what we're trying to achieve here is 2 routes. The first is our welcome screen, and the second is our login screen. The login screen does not require the ensure key is valid middleware. However, the welcome screen does. And if we land on the welcome screen without a valid ensure key is valid, then we forward ourselves to the login screen, which we can see here. So if the key does not contain my secret key, then we redirect to the login. And this happens for every route within this group. So now I've commented all this out, let's create this from scratch. The first thing I'm going to do is just go into the tutorials and tutorial 1, and then I'm going to type PHP artisan make middleware, passing in the ensure key is valid. I'm going to press enter, and that's going to create our file ensure key is valid, which is this one here. and we have our handle method. Now the handle method isn't doing anything, it's just returning back to the next closure. So what we need to do is manipulate that. But before we do, let's create a root. So let's go to the web.php, and I'm just going to copy this root here. I'm going to paste it underneath, take the comments out. So this is going to create our standard welcome screen. Let's fire up the browser. So let's type php artisan serve, and here we can see the welcome screen for Laravel. Let's now update the middleware so our ensure key is valid actually checks whether or not we have a secret key on the request. Within the handle method, I'm going to have an if statement where we're saying if the input key does not equal my secret key, and instead of returning to the next closure, we're going to redirect to the login screen. Now we have our middleware created. We need to assign this to our root. So if we go back to the web.php, what we can do is call the middleware method on the root, like so. So we do arrow and then middleware. We can pass in an array if we wanted to, so we can have multiple middlewares connected to this root. So I'm going to create an array here, and we're going to have the file ensure key is valid, and that's the class there. Make sure we add the semicolon on the end and save the file. And I'm going to create the login screen. So we're going to just copy this and paste this underneath. Let's uncomment all of that. And after we've added the login root here, so we're not having any middleware attached to this, if we refresh the page, we land on the login screen. And in this tutorial, I've created a login.blade where we have the message add login here. So we've landed on that page. Now let's just play around with the browser a minute. Let's go back to the browser. If we go back to the /, we redirect ourselves back to the login screen. That's because we don't have the key. Now imagine a real world application where you have hundreds, if not thousands of roots. It's going to be very awkward to work out which root belongs to which middleware. What you can use is something called groups to group your roots to a specific set of middleware. So for example, if all of your roots needed to be assigned to this ensure key is valid middleware, we would create a group and put all of our roots within it. We can then tailor and exclude certain roots from the grouping. Let's take a look at that now. So what we're going to do is create our middleware ensure key is valid class group. And within that group, we're going to have all of these roots. This means that we no longer need to apply the root to the welcome screen. And what we can do is exclude the login screen from the group. And we do that using the without middleware method. So we're saying that all of the roots within this group must have the middleware ensure key is valid, except for any roots that call without middleware with those particular middlewares that we're choosing to exclude, which means that both of these roots run this middleware except the login screen. Let's go back to the browser and refresh our login screen. That should just take us to the add login is here. Let's remove login. So we just go to /. That should redirect us to the login screen. So again, our welcome screen, which is /, takes us to the login screen. Even though this login root is within this middleware group of ensure key is valid, we're excluding that using the without middleware method, passing in the ensure key is valid class. As always, I'll provide links to a tutorial write-up on howtocodewell.net. That will also include a link to the GitHub repository. If you found this tutorial helpful, then please let me know. Also share it around to those that you may think might find this useful as well. If you've got any questions, let me know in the comment section below. Thank you ever so much for watching. Happy coding, everyone. I'll see you again in the next tutorial.